What's good everyone, I'm Zayas, and today I'm here to review Dungeon Meshi by Ryoko Kui. Her first full-length manga, Dungeon Meshi, came to an end a few months ago. Previously, she had drawn some one-shots, which were actually, honestly, among some of the better one-shots I've read recently. The art wasn't that great in her earlier one-shots, but they do remind me of that Tezuka style of story, or just older styles of manga in general, where they're either trying to tell some sort of fable that has some sort of message attached to it, or the story is about some type of tragedy, usually pertaining to some type of romance. The Seven Little Stars of the Dragons was the best out of them. I think it was the most fantasy oriented. The Dragon School is on top of the mountain was a little less polished, making it just a little bit worse for me, and Terrarium was the worst. It was easily the weirdest and strangest. It did have humor in it, something that the other two didn't really have, and I still enjoyed it quite a bit. A lot of the potential she showed in these one-shots when it came to story writing does come to fruition here in Dungeon Meshi. Dungeon Meshi is a fantasy food series, which is certainly a unique combination that we really haven't seen a lot of, especially not the way that she chose to do it, but it works pretty well. It's mostly just a fantasy series, and the food is there sometimes for comedic effect, or sometimes just to deliver a message. I want to talk about the cast first because we get an amazing bunch of characters. Leos, Senshi, Marcel, Chilchuk, not only do these characters all have great personal character arcs, but the chemistry they shared and the way they came together created some really hilarious moments. Senshi and Leos are usually completely off the rail and pretty crazy when it comes to choosing the foods they want to eat, and Marcel and Chilchuk are usually quite reserved and cautious, and this dynamic created a ton of funny scenes throughout this series. There's other fun interactions between these characters too, like Senshi treating everybody like children, especially Chilchuk, or like Marcel and Leos having this very atypical romance going on kind of in the background. Comedy does play a big role in this series, but even bigger are the fantasy elements. Dungeon Meshi does seem to take a lot of inspiration from Lord of the Rings and D&D, although it might not even be direct, because I've seen that she does a lot of fan art for series like Pathfinder Kingmaker or Baldur's Gate 3, so she might have played a game influenced by D&D, and that's where it comes from. But yeah, 4 characters, all of different races, going on a journey to save their friend from a dragon. It sounds like it could be the start to somebody's D&D campaign. It's not your typical fantasy series though, although it does retain themes of dungeons, of dragons, and magic. It gets pretty adventurous with things like its choices of monsters, with the politics that are happening between these races, and just the setting of the dungeon in general. A good chunk of the monsters used in this manga are ones that are lesser seen in fantasy worlds, stuff like bicorns, living armor, basilisks. It gives the series its own nice little feel to it. Her ideas of adventures are also pretty creative too. It's not your standard stuff, running into shapeshifters, changing races, stuff that really develops the characters but also kind of expands the world and creates these great adventures. And as a cherry on top, their adventures are almost never about brute strength. Usually there's some type of thinking or some type of knowledge that they use to get past these monsters. On top of that, the explanations of how the dungeon works, the explanations of the monsters' roles in the ecosystem, and the explanations of the politics above ground are all very thorough and well thought out, resulting in the world really feeling alive. Basically, it has great world building. It kind of reminds me of manga like Dragon Quest Dai no Deboken or Beat the Vandal Buster in that aspect. And the cooking aspect really isn't too prominent. You might think this series is similar to like a Shokugeki or like Bambino, but this is way closer to something like a Toriko or like a Yakitake Japan. Me personally, I really just zoned out a lot of the cooking aspects because I'm not really here to learn how to cook merman eggs. Comedy is really a cornerstone of this series. It's funny in so many different ways, consistently throughout the work. Sometimes it has to do with the expressions on these characters. Laos is always looking so innocent and childlike, and he always looks so happy when they get to taste a monster and really upset when they don't. And then you have Senshi always looking super stone-faced no matter the situation. And then Marcel's always agitated and slowly calms down, and Chilchuk just looks annoyed all the time. Regardless of what the joke is, the way these characters' personalities come together it's bound to be funny. There are also jokes kind of like about the fact that no matter how crazy this series is, no matter the fact that the demons are destroying the world and like all that random crazy stuff, everything still connects back to food at the end of the day. It's also can be quite funny when we see these other characters trying their best. They're super serious, trying to defeat these monsters, and then it cuts back to Leis's party, and these guys are the exact opposite of serious. Easily the peak of comedy in this series, though, is the scene where Leis decides to, for whatever reason, think that it's a good idea to pounce on this wolf that like shapeshifts people. Yeah, that was a great scene. When it comes to art, this manga really hits the nail on the head when it comes to fundamentals. Nothing fancy, nothing over the top, but instead a lot of care and effort put into making a world, making these memorable monsters, making these characters look super fantasy-like, making these backdrops with dwarven pillars, with barrels, with bricks, with traps. You can tell a lot about a character just based on the way they look. Leis looks super innocent and naive, Senshi looks very mature, and they all look very, very fantasy and magical, which is what she's going for. Side characters can blend in a little bit together, especially when they are of the same race, and this isn't otherworldly art, but it's very, very, very solid. Basically just about as good as you can get without it being amazing. I did find that as the series continued, the lines looked sharper and more distinct. I also really loved the wing line's design and the fact that it was hinted at everywhere in this work even before he made his appearance. Foreshadowing and these backward connections happen everywhere in this manga. Small moments which happen in the first few chapters come back around when we learn more about the Forgotten City, stuff like these paintings. There's even moments like Marcel dying to the slime, which is more thoroughly explained later on. And stuff like this just makes it feel like there's tons to learn and explore about the world of Dungeon Meshi. Characters and scenarios are always set up ahead of time, so it never really feels like we're getting developments that come out of nowhere. Another series that does this even better is One Piece. And when you consider all the little things that are explained about the dungeon, stuff like the cleaners, about dragons breathing fire, you know, like the ecosystem like I mentioned earlier, it all adds up to give the world a lot of depth. The series starts off very strong, and then it really kicked into a new gear after they defeated the dragon, but I found that it did taper off a little bit towards the end. Post-dragon fight, the series' atmosphere shifted a little bit. It retained the comedic bits, but became a little more dark and twisted with these crazy abominations like the Chimera. There was also the stomach-churning scene with Marcel and necromancy. I found the scene to be pretty creepy and disturbing, but at the same time it was also pretty funny, which is a weird mix for sure, but somehow it works. When it comes to characters, they're very, very solid as well. My favorite would have to be Senshi. His chill demeanor, his obsession with cooking, which apparently came from almost starving, the fact that he has this stone-faced expression which almost never changes, the cooking tools which he made out of adamantite and mithril. He's just super grounded and hilarious all the time. Characters like Leis and Marcel probably have a lot more to talk about when it comes to their character. To me, Leis was a close second to Senshi. He was also pretty funny. Leis, like I said earlier, is incredibly innocent and childlike, which makes his passion for monsters not only pretty funny, but also kind of admirable in a way. His knowledge and enthusiasm for monsters ends up saving them from a lot of situations from these monsters, and also ends up ironically being the reason why he becomes king. The fact that he doesn't have any ulterior motives and his passion is so pure and untainted is what makes his character so great. Marcel at times can kind of be like the voice of reason, which makes it even more surprising when she tries to give everyone eternal life and become Lord of the Dungeon. It makes sense when you realize that she is a bit of a perfectionist, you know, top of the class, and a lot of those traits also add in to making for some funny moments, like when she messes up all the time and tries to cover it up. Chilchuck can be a bit of a tsundere at times. He's pretty necessary for the group. He's quite funny. He has his own moments. I would say there's less to talk about when it comes to him. There are other characters too, like Kabru and the Elf Captain. They don't get as much time as our main cast, but they do grow throughout the series, and they are fun characters. I wouldn't say in isolation any of these characters are the greatest written characters ever, but when they come together, it is pretty magical. The weakest part of this manga is the ending. There are things to it that I did like the lion trying to cleverly lure these people down into the dungeon, and once we figure it out, it was a great moment. but the ending as a whole was messy. And when I say the end, I'm talking about when Marcel becomes Lord of the Dungeon and onward. At first, Laius was acting in character. He let Thistle go naively, thinking that Thistle would change. I was like, okay, this is perfectly logical. But afterwards, he decides to blindly chase Marcel while Kalbru is trying to give him information on the demon. Now, the fact that he refused this information is kind of like weird to me, because he's the type of guy who wants to learn about every monster in the world. So for some reason, just to go chasing Marcel just seemed off. You can argue that, yeah, he was worried about Marcel, maybe he wasn't thinking logically, but at the same time, the whole scenario just seems so forced so that they will get trapped by Marcel, so that we can get more of Marcel's backstory. It also gets very chaotic with how many characters show up at the end. Now, I do appreciate a lot of these characters. It's nice to see so many characters come together. It just, there was a lot of unnecessary characters that really didn't have to be there, that were mostly forgotten within a few chapters. The demon being infinitely powerful really did limit how the series could end. The way they defeat this demon is no different to how they defeat any other monster in this series. They identify its weakness, its desires, and then they capitalize on it. There should be more grandiosity when it comes to the final fight of the series, especially when it's against this ancient being who's infinitely powerful and has been alive since the start of time and almost destroyed the world on countless occasions. The lion's design was very noble and powerful. I like that. There are some funny moments that happen here, like when Laos transforms into his sketch that he drew, or just when they're pulling out food analogies when the world is literally about to end. So it can be funny, but the ending just didn't deliver in a way that I think it could have. I'm not mad at this ending. It did resolve everything nicely. It just feels like it's a step down from what came before it. After the demon was defeated though, it does end on a strong note. We get a feast with plenty of funny moments. I love the feast. And we finally learn that Laius' curse ended up being the fact that monsters will never go near him again, which was a pretty funny way to end off the series. Dungeon Meshi is very much worth the read. A great world, tons of great characters, you get lots of laughs, just a slightly off-putting maybe 20 chapters or so. I'm feeling a strong 8. Thank you everyone for watching. Like and subscribe, leave a comment about anything to do with manga, and the lists are coming up soon. I've already started on them, and yeah, I'll try to make a ton of lists. I also want to do some other videos, so I might try some other videos out. Hopefully they all come out before the end of the year. No promises though. I'll see you.